Um, Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam. Hilchos Ishus, Prakim, Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, and Yud Gimel. We are starting with the 11th chapter. The 11th chapter is all about the obligation of giving a ksuba, the different numbers of the Ikir ksuba, and the whole topic of Tainas Psulim, of a man who's married and claims that his wife was not a psula. As we will see all of the details in this chapter. This chapter has 17 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Hanoisa psula. If a man marries a psula, means a virgin, shenis almana, that she's a widow or that she's divorced, oy nechlatza, she received chalitza. In other words, before the husband engaged in marital relations, she became widowed, she became divorced. So it depends. Im min ha'edusin, Miss Almana, if she became widowed only from Edelsin, then her psuba remains to be Mosayim. However, if she became a widow from marriage, even though the couple did not have marital relations, God forbid, right after the chuppah, the husband died. Never, since she's married with Nesuyin Ksubasa Meya, because the halacha is that Shem, Mishani says, Hadehi Kiba Ula. She has the status of a woman that already had a relation with a man. These are all women that the presumption is that someone had a relation with them. So in the shtachad, or if she converted, or if she was redeemed from her captivity prior to her being 3 years old. And as we'll continue to learn that even if a man, God forbid, had a relation with her, that means he penetrated her, her hymen will grow back. And therefore, she has a din of apsula, ksuvas, and masayim. But if she already turned 3 or older, then ksuvasan meya. Why? Halacha beis. Even though that they are psulas. Answer is choyel v'cheskas hanasuya shetiboil. This goes back to halacha aleph, since there is such a presumption. V'cheskas hashivcha v'hanachnis v'hashvuya. That they all had the relations with the man, with the will, by a captive woman against the will, but such a relation happened. And that becomes a halacha, whether this de facto happened or not. Next thing, a woman who's called a mukatz eitz. The word mukatz eitz means a woman that was struck by a piece of wood, which means if a woman got a wound that somehow broke through her hymen. So she never had a relation with her man, but she doesn't have the psulim. The din is ksuvasa meya. Now the Rambam adds a very important din, even if she got married. And the man made a condition. I'm giving you a condition. I'm giving you kedushin, b'tanai, that you are a real psula. Turns out that she's not a real psula, even though she didn't lose it because of a man. So one might have thought that he can claim mekachtos. No, we don't say that. If she becomes a mukas eitz, the ksuba is going to be 100. And what we will see later is that if the taina that will be accepted, when it will, in the cases where it will be accepted of, I thought I married you on the condition that you are a psula, with the understanding you're a psula. If you're not a psula, meaning if a man had a relation with her, we will see he doesn't owe her the ksuba money. Here we say he owes her only 100, even though that's a chiddush, even though he said al-manashi psula shleima. Now, if a girl under 3 had a relation with a man, even if an adult came on her, ksuba remains 200. Why? Because of the physical phenomena that soifa tachsel of psula, that psulam, the hymen will return, will grow back, sharp psulas. Another din v'chein gedola. If you have a adult woman, that a boy, a child under 9 had a relation with her, ksuvasa masayim. Ki'ilu loy niv'alu klal. It's as if she had no relation at all. Shebias ben tesha shana v'yom echad bia. Only a relation from a boy 9 or older is considered halachically as a physical relation. Pachos mizeh ein b'yasi biyam. Halacha dalet psulam. you have a version that she's a brigedes, that means she's not just 12 and she's not just 12, but she's already older, she's mature. Or if she's blind, or if she's an islandess, that means that we know that she will never be able to have children. She has many male characteristics. In all of these cases, the ksuba remains Masai, 200. But a chareshes, a woman who's a deaf mute, a woman who's mentally deemed to be incapable, they don't have any ksuba. A shoita doesn't have a ksuba because there's no marriage. There's no marriage, even rabbinic marriage, to a woman who's a shoita. A deaf mute woman, even though midrabanan there was a concept of marriage by her, but there's no need to give her a ksuba. Because if people will have to, who will marry her, will still owe her a ksuba, no one will marry her. The guy says, listen, I already, so to say, settled by marrying a deaf mute. I have to add a ksuba. If I divorce her, I'm not going to marry her. Therefore, she also won't be, she will not receive mizoinus, or the man will not be obligated to give her sustenance, and nor any of the stipulations that come together with the ksuba, as we will see today in the later chapters. Now, if a man marries a chereshes, which we just said, there is no need for any ksuba, and during the marriage, she gets healed, now, yesh lo ksuba utanai ksuba, automatically he will owe her the ksuba, and that will be a ksuba of 100. Don't forget, he had a relation with her, so it's not going to be of 200, but at least it's going to be of 100 zuz. Halacha 5. If a man marries a deaf mute, and he wrote a ksuba for meyamana, even though he was not obligated to do so, well, if he undertook that obligation, then he owes her the money. If a person, so to say, willingly damages his own property, then I have the right to give away my property. Halacha 6. Now, if the man is deaf mute, if the man has the status of a shaitan that married healthy women, even if they get healed later, they cannot demand their ksuba because during the time of Nisuyin, they were not obligated. But hold on, but if the man wants to continue the marriage, then he has to give the ksuba. He has to undertake now to give the ksuba. Now, says that Rambam, if the Beis Din was the one that married off this chedesh, and whatever the circumstance was, she only agreed to marry him by there being an obligation of a ksuba, and the Beis Din wrote that ksuba, so then he's bound by that ksuba that the Beis Din wrote against him. Tell us Beis Din, because that's the power of the Beis Din. Avala shoita, the Rambam says, if a man is a shoita, Beis Din will never marry him. Why wouldn't the Chachamim marry him? So here's the rule, guys. The Chachamim only go beyond the biblical and marry people, even if biblically they cannot be married, if the Chachamim foresee this marriage to potentially last. The Chachamim never see the marriage of a shoita to last. It's going to be short-lived. And therefore, as far as the Chachamim are concerned, they don't want such a man to be married. So the concept of having let's try it out. Let's experiment with the marriage for a year. There's no such a thing. Marriage by default means the commitment is forever. Not that it always works forever. But if the Chachamim foresee that this will not go forever, they will never invest in that marriage.
Rabbi, nowadays you see people with Down syndrome getting married.
I don't think Down syndrome has a din of a shoita. I think Down syndrome people are very evolved. They are very evolved.
That's true.
Important to know how to define and by the way, also when it comes to any of such ailments, this is what they call high functioning, there's low functioning. They're not all grouped together. And it could be that in a certain level, there is no marriage. There's no halachic marriage. But you're right, it's a beautiful thing that they're getting married. I remember when someone had autism, a parent, I'm going back to the 80s. See, then we didn't understand that much about all of these ailments. So There was a father that walked, there was a man that walked by the Rebbe, and he told the Rebbe that his son has autism. And the Rebbe right away said something beautiful. The Rebbe says that autism makes it difficult to connect between being Adam Lachaveru. But they therefore have a stronger connection between man and God.
Amazing.
And the father says, yeah. Because the father was acknowledging that Rebbe was, I think, telling the father to tell the child to daven. The beautiful daveners. They connect to God well. So a shayt is a whole different thing. Anyways, there was no need to institute that because why marry when you're a katan when you can marry when you're an adult? Now the question is, why do we find that biblically even there's a concept of marrying off a minor girl? Why don't we say the same logic? Why should a minor girl ever get married? Wait until she becomes an adult. So the answer is because by a girl, sometimes in some societies, if she will not be married, other men will take sexual advantage of her. And the fact that she's married will prevent other men. You don't marry off a young lad meaning he's biologically 13, but we did not see whether he physically matured by having 2 pubic hairs. For that, you have to actually check him out. Allah is 7. Even if he's already 9 years old, which means that his act of bia is halachically considered an act of relation. He's not a minor cannot be obligated, but if he becomes an adult and they choose to remain married, now they had marital relations, so she's not a virgin. So the ksuba will not be 200, but it's going to be 100 zus. They were married already, but they both converted and now they continue their marriage. So then ksuva samana. Shalman askein kimon. Allah ches kol psula. Sheksuva samasayim. Now we're going to open up the topic of tainus psulim. Guys who ever learned ksubas, tainus psulim is the case where a man claims she was not a virgin. Now, you should understand something. When I make a claim, Kevin, that will relieve a financial burden, I'm trying to get away from some financial burden. Normally, the rule is I have to prove my claim to be true. When a man gets married and the ksuba is from a psula, he owes, if he'll divorce her, if he'll predecease her, 200 zuz. If he claims she was not a virgin, normally the rule would be prove it. We'll see that in certain circumstances, the Chachamim believe the man with consequences, which is a big chiddush. The Rambam is going to write in the chapter, why do we believe him? Not always, sometimes. But before we're getting into the why, just to know the scenarios, ta'anat tainas psulim. If he has a claim, I married her with the understanding she's a virgin. The ksuba was of a virgin, and she is not. So he says that now if a man married a woman and the ksuba was not of a virgin, so there is no taina. But kol psula sheksuvasa masayim yesh la tainas psulim. B'chol kshuvasa mana, if the ksuba is only of one mana, or the rare cases where there's no ksuba altogether, he can never make such a claim. Another rule, then Erusin and the Suin were not done back to back. So there was normally 12 months or however much time was between the halachic kiddushin to the Nasuim. If a man even once was secluded alone with his kala, he can never claim tainus psulim, because the Torah says could be she's not a virgin, but you did it. In other words, we have to understand when it comes to sexual relations, the moment people don't know where to put the border. Yichud is one such a line. If a man is secluded alone with a woman, it's not that they're always going to have a marriage. We're not saying that, but such a thing is possible. At some point, for some people, you can't stop whatever is going to start taking place. Halacha 9. My tainus psulim. What is tainus psulim? He married a psula with the presumption she's a psula, and then he claims, Lo motzasi a psula, I did not find her to be a virgin. Now, what does it mean? What do you didn't find her to be a virgin? So says the Rambam, there are 2 signs that indicate that she indeed is a woman that has this heman. In other words, that she was never with a man. Number 1, that damim that at the end of the first time she has a relation, blood will flow from her body. And number 2, hadoichak, there's going to be a tightness. Certain tightness that happens the first time the man is together with his wife. Halacha 10. Now, let's go into details. And he claims that's tainus psulim. Guys, this is the beginning of the whole Masechet Ksubas. right? Why did they enact then that people should get married Wednesday night? If a man has Tainus Psulim, Beis Din should be open right away. And he claims, I did not. So first of all, 1 second. It's not that we believe him. We begin to ask him. Ask her. If she says, Emes, yeah, it's true. I was not a psulam. But you know why? Because when I was a girl, I fell on a piece of, I fell and I got hit by a piece of wood, which means there was a wound. Something went into me. She was penetrated by a wound. Or the earth. I fell on the earth. And therefore, I lost my psulam. If she says that, in other words, she's not contradicting what he's saying. She's explaining how it came to be. Then everything is good. Then she's believed. Now, believe does not mean that he's going to still owe her 200 zuz. No. But then he has to give her a mana. Mamish, that's what we learned. That was the chiddush that we learned before that if a man marries a woman on the condition she's a psula, gemura, she's a mukatz eitz, that was halachi gimel, he has to give her ksuba meya. He cannot say, I was tricked, I don't have to give her anything. How do I know that it happened? I don't trust you. Maybe a man had a relation with you. And by the way, if a man had a relation with her and he married her on the presumption that she's a psula, because the ksuba is 200, then he would not owe her any ksuba. We don't say that. We don't listen to him. So what's the most he can do if he has this worry? So he can make a general chayim that whoever is tricking me for me to make them owe money that I don't really owe should be put into chayim. And that is the most he can do to calm his fears that no man had a relation with her. But why can the man not abnegate himself from paying all of the suma? Because he doesn't know for sure that a man had a relation with her. All he knows is she did not have the hymen. That's all he knows. And she's saying emes, and she's explaining why. So he has no time. Now, what happens? Allah Yudal of Amra, if she says hin, yes, emes Amar, true that I was not a psula. And it was from a man. But a man raped me after we were engaged. Now, why is after we were engaged? Even if a man, God forbid, raped her prior to engaged, but when he got engaged to her, she was already non-virgin, then he was tricked. Then he doesn't have to give her a ksuba of 200. But if when he got engaged to her, she was a psula, and only after they got halachically engaged, we're saying the word rape, because if she had it willingly, he cannot be married to her, right? Only the wife of a kohen cannot be with the husband, even by an act of rape. Here, she says it happened to me, I was raped, but after we were engaged, then he has to give her 200 zuz. She's believed, and he has to give 200 zuz like before. And even if he counterclaims, no. Maybe you were raped prior to us getting engaged. And therefore, omikri mekachtos, because I undertook an obligation based on an erroneous presumption. Or maybe you had a relation after we were engaged, but you did so willingly. Okay, again, like we learned before. So he has a worry. That worry is not enough to abnegate himself from paying her the ksuba, right? The ksuba of 100, which will have to, the ksuba of 200 over here. Because if she got raped after the engagement, he has to give her 200 zuz. But again, he can put a chedim stam on Mishatlain Sheker. Halacha 12, if he claims I did not find her to be a psula, that was the third scenario. And she says, Loi ba elai, my husband never had a relation with me. You listen to this guy, he get married. He's saying she was not a virgin. She says, how do you know? You didn't do it yet. I'm still a psula. Now, she's making a claim that could be authenticated. So first of all, they examined her. The Rambam does not write what they did. If you remember from the Gemara, they would have her sit on a barrel of wine. The Rambam doesn't write what the Gemara says, because that type of examination, you have to know how to do it. And the Rambam felt that we don't know how to do it. The Rambam didn't want to write down what they did. They just writes there was a concept of examining her, or they make them have a relation in front of witnesses. It's not what it sounds. They don't have a relation in front of witnesses. So the Rambam explains in a moment what they do. I take it back. What they do is that the Rambam doesn't explain. The Gemara explains is that they put them into a room secluded. Two Edom are standing outside. The bed, the sheet is white. After the relation, they check the sheet to see if there's blood. That's what. Now Amra, if she says Bo'elai, what happens if she says, What are you talking about, husband? You had a relation with me, and I was a psula. Psula mitzvasani chalab psulais. There was tightness. I bled. You're lying. So now they ask him, what happened that brought you to say that she was not a psula? So if he says, because I did not find her to bleed, so then you should know, says the Rambam, that there are certain women that don't have hymenal blood. There are certain women that b'chlal don't bleed. So they check her family. Shema ein lahem dam klal. Maybe they don't bleed at all. Some families don't bleed. They don't have dam nida. They don't have dam sulim. And im nimsu kulam came. And if they take a find that this runs in the family, so then they believe her. But if they don't find any other family member with such a condition, we're not done yet. Then they make other examinations. In other words, we're trying to figure out how it could be true that she's claiming I was a psula, and he's saying I did not find psula. Could be she was very ill. When women get ill, sometimes their body like dries out. And therefore, maybe if she'll get healed from that illness, the blood will return there. Maybe she was fasting a lot. You know that many women that run marathons, they don't get the period anymore. The body cannot handle all this. They bathe her, you give her to eat, or you give her to drink until she gets healthier. And then they have a relation again. And now we see if she'll bleed or not. And maybe she'll bleed, and that resolves it. But if that also doesn't resolve it, that's Tainus Psulim. Because Tainus Psulim is only when she contradicts it. He's saying, you were not a virgin. She's saying, I was. Now, normally he says, she says, normally, this is an exception. Here we'll believe him. We'll see why. Even if it was tight, the main sign is there was no dam, ein kam psulim. Shkol psula yesh lo dam. And the Rambam holds that's true not only if she's a nara, certainly when she's a ketana, even when she's very young, and even when she's a mature woman. The only reason why a woman will lose her blood is if she got ill. But if we know she didn't get ill, now you got Tainus Psulim. Now, the Imamar, if the man says, I did not find her to be a psula, not because it didn't bleed. He writes for the other reason. I did not feel tightness. That's the expression of Chazal. I found an open door. So then, now that will depend on her age. How old is she? Maybe she's already boigetis. Boigetis really could begin from 12 and a half, but a boigetis can be a 15-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 30-year-old, an older woman. Not an old woman, an older, a mature woman. Because most women that are already in that age of boigetis, there is no tightness that would be felt a lot when they would have been 12. Share Godla, because she's already older. The adhesion of her limbs lessened. Right? That tightness already went away. Now, if she didn't reach that older age, they tell him, you're telling me that you didn't find her a psula. She's saying she is a psula. He's saying she's not a virgin. Maybe maybe you leaned on the side, or maybe you had a relation very gently, and that's why you did not feel. They began to ask questions. Now, if he says loy ki, no. Vadai pesach v'suachoyim says that Rambam harezu tainas psul l'chol psula shalei bagra b'ktana beinara. That's a taina as long as she's not biologically older. That will be a valid taina. Blood that Rambam holds is always a taina, even if she's 18, even if she's 30. If she says before marriage, I am a virgin, and he claims there was no hymenal bleeding, that's tainas psul. If he says there was no tightness, that's only a taina if she's either a minor or until 12 and a half. Whether she's healthy, whether she's ill. Shekol psula nara, that her door is closed. Now, more than that, even if she bled a little bit, if the door was open, there's no psulim, and therefore there is tainas psulim. Halacha Yud Gimel. Yesh goyim shoyru. There are other opinions that hold shahabai get us a lotanas damim, that there's no claim of blood, not the way that Rambam paskins. And the yesh lotanas pesach psuach, the opposite of what the Rambam says. The Rambam says, I know I disagree with both points. The And they made it because they had wrong versions. They had a wrong nusach in the Gemara. The Torah is choiseb and is choisholahem. V'kfar bodakti al asfarim rabim v'kadmoinim umatzas yeshadav v'kameisho manu. That watch ein labigeres elatayos on bilva. Now halacha yudal. Chachamim heim shetiknu ikek ksuba leisha. The Rambam holds that ksuba is a rabbinic obligation. And just to add, why did they say that there has to be a ksuba? Kedei shaloi tia kala be'einav lohitzia. In order for a man who, even in a moment of, God forbid, very upset at his wife, he's going to contemplate divorcing her, maybe he'll calm down and he won't want to divorce her. So when you say divorcing her cost money, you wait. And they wanted people to pause before they're going to get a divorce. That's the reason for the ksuba. They were the ones that decreed, and the woman contradicts, not like the other cases we had in the beginning of this chapter, where we will believe her. But if there's a blatant contradiction, it's either he or she, one of them is saying the truth, then we believe him. The Rambam is saying, why would we believe him? So first of all, the first step is that since the obligation is only rabbinic, the Chachamim have the right to break the rule of Hamoitzi Mechaveira Olavaraya. They have a reason. V'oleh lo haviraya. And lo yalo ish. And why? Shechazaka hi she'ein adam tereach b'seudo mafsida. A person is not going to bother himself and invest all of the money in the wedding and then lose it all. What is he basically claiming? He's claiming that the whole marriage was erroneous. He doesn't want to be married to her. No one marries a woman to make that claim the next morning. That doesn't make sense. People say, they have what's it called, buyer's remorse. It doesn't work that way with marriage. When you buy a car, you can have buyer's remorse the next morning. When you're getting married, you really think it through. And even if a person has doubts, it doesn't go that last night he went into the chuppah, all joy, filled with simcha. And the next morning he's right away claiming that she wasn't a virgin and he doesn't owe her anything. He doesn't want to be married. No one does that unless it's emes. Person doesn't turn his joy into mourning. Halacha tezvav, va'admasa yesh le'tan masulim. For how long can he make that claim? So if they were secluded, which is normally what happens after you get married, he can only make the claim right away. Now, if it happens to be that they got married in a setting where the couple was never allowed to be together. I know, whatever the psychologist, Meshugana people. I was once a guest right after I got married, like a few months after I got married in someone's home. They made sure that we should not be in a room that you'd shaykh to be together. It was glass windows, like illness. So sometimes couples are in a place where you're public. So then you can even make it after 30 days. Allah says, that he is believed in the case where she is contradicting him. So that's only for him to walk away from paying the ksuba itself. But the Tosefes, now guys, this is the previous chapter, Perikut speaks about that a man could optionally add more to the ikar. If he made such an addition, he cannot walk away from that. And she's going to get it. He'll divorce her. He won't have to pay the 200 zuz. None of it. But he has to pay the Tosefes. Here he has to bring a proof. Here it's not enough, he says. Or if she admitted that she was a ba'ula prior to the halachic engagement and she tricked him. Lefikach, and therefore, yesh loy lahashbia benakitas chayfetz kedin kodesh ma'amenoit. In the case of the Tosefes, he can make her swear, even though that he's not believed with his taina, but he's believed enough to make her swear, and she will collect the Tosefes. She can never make him swear. You're saying I'm not a virgin? I am a virgin. At least you swear that I'm not a virgin. He doesn't have to do that. Because of this cloud, the Chachamim says, the only thing she can do now, she can put a chedem. I'm putting a chedem on anyone that's wrongfully wronging me with money. Now, guys, one final halacha, and this is so important. Kindness psulam keva is that the man is saying she's not a virgin, and therefore I want to divorce her, and I don't want to have to pay the ksuba. Taka, he'll be believed. But if a man says she's not a virgin, but I want to be married to her, so that's the final halacha. That's fine. He's believed. But if you want to stay with her, you have to make a new ksuba. Now, the new ksuba doesn't have to be for 200 because she's not a psula, but you have to make a ksuba for 100 because there's a rule that a man is not allowed to be with his wife even for one moment without a ksuba. Beautiful. Okay. Now, here we go. The 12th chapter of Hilchas Ishus. So we spoke about until now the ksuba. That ksuba begins with a ikid. The ikid is psula 200, not psula 100 zuz. There are many other obligations that come with marriage, and as we will see, really, Kevan, a man has 10 responsibilities to his wife. All of them are somehow included in the ksuba, even though not all of them are written out. But that's the obligation. And a woman, or let me word it this way, if we're focusing on the man is responsible in 10 areas to the wife, and the man receives 4 privileges from the wife. That's marriage. You chayiv 10 and you get 4. If you understand that, then you'll be a happy man. Many things in life, people feel frustrated because they think that they are entitled to something and they're not getting what they are entitled to. If you have a lower sense of entitlement, you'll be a happier person. And halpi Torah, you get married, a man, you're chayiv 10 to her, and you get 4 from her. And that's this chapter. This chapter is 24 halachas, halacha al. When a man marries a wife, whether she's a psula, therefore the ksuba will be the ikr will be higher. Whether she's a bu'ula, she already had a relation with a man. Whether she's an adult, whether she's a minor, whether she was born Jewish, whether she's a convert, whether she was a shifcha that became emancipated, he will incur 10 responsibilities, and he will receive 4 privileges. And here we go. Now, from the 10 that is chayiv, 3 of them are biblical, that Rambam holds, and 7 are rabbinical. Halacha base. These are the ones mentioned in Pashas Mishpatim. She'era, Kesusa ve'oinasa. Yet there's a machlokes b'shainim what these words mean. We're going to learn what we also learn in Chitas. The Rambam says she'era means mizoinus. Rambam is going to break down into details. What does it mean to give her sustenance? We'll see soon what that means in details. Ksusa, clothing. Again, what does that mean? Like, how many garments does he have to buy or when? We'll see that. All that will be broken down in details. And the word oinasa means that a man, this is the way it's framed. A man is chayiv to his wife, conjugal, I think, relations, marital relations. Those are the 3. The other 7 are medivrei soifrim. Now, all of them are called stipulations of Beis Din. Stipulation of a Beis Din mean, this is how it works, Kevan. If Beis Din stipulates that I'm chayiv something, whether I obligated myself or not, I'm bound by it. In other words, the other 7, and therefore many of them are not even written into the ksuba. So even though a chassan prior to the kinyan should know what it says in the ksuba, if he's not going to learn this chapter, he won't even know that he's chayiv that much. He doesn't have to know that because you're bound by the Beis Din. Beis Din has that power. What are they? One of the 7 is still considered part of the main ksuba, and the other are called tenoye ksuba. That's the way it's framed. The stipulations of the, and here they are. That if she gets ill, he's chayiv to heal her. If she gets kidnapped, he's chayiv to free her. These things can cost a lot of money. If she passes away, he's chayiv to bury her. And after he passes away, so the ksuba means that she gets from the estate kevan the ksuba. More than that, that prior to her getting remarried, as long as she wants, she sits in his estate, which belongs now to the heirs, and she continues to live off it. That's a big thing. After his death, as long as she remains a widow, which means if she chooses to marry again, she loses that right. Then she only collects the ksuba. Next, if she will have daughters from him, that they can also continuously live off his estate after his death, prior to them getting engaged. We don't mention the sons because the sons inherit money. The daughters don't inherit, but they get to live off the estate. And the Leois Bonea has Mimenu Yorshim Ksubasa Yasar al Chalkam by Yerusha If she predeceases him, what happens normally? Kevan. So then as we'll see, one of the privileges that a man has from his wife is he inherits her. But hold on, if she has children with him, and later he dies, so since she died before him, you would say he doesn't have to give her the ksuba, which he doesn't. She died. After he dies, the estate has to give her sons whatever she would have gotten from the ksuba, and only then divide the rest of the estate with other sons from another woman. So that's another obligation that he has to her. That's the 10 responsibilities. Halacha 3, what are the 4 privileges that he receives? Are all midrabanan. Midoiraisa marriage, it means it's a one-way street obligation. It's important. Marriage means I'm chayiv to give my wife the zoynus, garments, and marital relation. Midrabanan, I'm chayiv to give her another 7. But I also have 4 privileges. And that is that her work, if she has income, the income goes to him. That's first privilege. Second privilege is that if she finds a lost article, like if she wins the lottery, he owns it. Number 3, that if she owns land during the marriage, he gets to have the user fruit off it. And number 4, if she predeceases him, he will yashin everything. Now that Rambam adds another layer. It's not only that he's chayev 10 and he has 4 privileges. They linked some of the responsibilities to the privileges, and that link is very important. There's consequences because of the linkage. What's the linkage? Halacha 4. That masa yedeo isha, that the reason why he has the privilege of receiving her income, that's because he's supporting her. What is that going to mean, Keva? That if a woman tells her husband, you know what? Don't support me, and I'm keeping my check, my salary. She has that right. Because it's linked. That the reason why he gets to eat the user fruit from her estate, if she owns an estate, is because he has to redeem her. Which also would mean, Kevin, that a woman can claim later when she gets married, listen to her husband, I don't want you to take my fruit. You don't have any rights to my rentals. And if I get kidnapped, I'll free myself. And the reason why he's chayiv to bury her is because he inherits her. These are linked. And now that we made such a linkage, therefore, if the woman says, don't give me sustenance, but I own my salary. We listen to her. We cannot force her to give the salary. Now, only she has the right. He doesn't have the right. Because it's common that a woman, especially then, did not earn enough money to cover her expenses. So we don't want to give him that right. If the husband is the one that says, you know what, I'm not going to give you your sustenance, and I'm not going to take your income. We don't listen to him because she'll be in dire straits. In other words, you can ask a kasha. Giving her sustenance is one of the 3 obligations from the Torah. Why are we calling she'eda tanaik suba? Because she has the right to tell him, I don't want it, and I'm not going to give you my income. The fact that she has the power to manipulate it, so it's not a always obligation. So we are putting it in the group of tanaik suba.
Is it conditional? If she stops earning, is it conditional?
If she stops earning, then she gets back her mezainas. In other words, Kevin, the fact that the Torah says that he's chayv mezainas, he's chayv mezainas. Now, there is one exception to that we'll have in this chapter. Any stipulation concerning finances can go even against the Torah law. Financial stipulation. So, if prior to marriage that was their agreement, if she agreed to that, then he won't be chayv. As we'll see in a moment. Only by money, not by, like if they get married on the condition that he doesn't have to give her conjugal rights. Such a stipulation is nonsensical. But by finances, you can make such a stipulation. Halacha 5. Guys, all of these responsibilities and the privileges, even though they're not written in the ksuba. Even if there's no ksuba, a man marries a woman. That's the way it works. Kivin Shanasa, once they're married, automatically the husband now has the rights to these 4 privileges, and the woman has the rights to the 10 obligations the husband owes her, even though they were never spoken out. Halacha 6 is about if prior to the marriage the husband stipulated, I don't want to be obligated on all these 10 obligations. Or if the woman made a stipulation, I don't want for my husband to have 4 privileges in me. No, I don't want it. So the rule is generally these conditions will be valid. Aside of the big 3, what are the 3 as we'll see in a moment? What are the 3 stipulations? What are the 3 obligations that you cannot nullify even with a stipulation prior to marriage? Conjugal rights. Doesn't matter who made that stipulation. Number 2, the Iker Ksuba, because the Chachamim do not allow for a husband to live with his wife without knowing that if he will divorce her, he has to give her the Ksuba. And the rabbinic rule that if she predeceases him, he will be the one inheriting her and not her biological family members. Allah Zain, for example, Hisna Isha, if prior to marriage, a man tells his wife, listen, I don't want to be obligated to give you the oina. Now, the Rambam is going to go into details exactly when are you obligated. It's not so clear. Right? Certain people are obligated to be with their wives once a week. Today we say twice a week or once a month. Whatever it is, there's an obligation. Tanai Batal, his stipulation means nothing, and he's chayv in oina because you stipulated against that which is written in the Torah, and it's not regarding money. If it would be regarding money, you could make such a stipulation, but this is not a monetary concept. Halacha 8. If he makes a stipulation, I'm marrying you, but I'm not going to pay you the ksuba. Even if you're saying I'm going to pay you some, I have to pay you 200, I'll pay you 20. Or he wrote, I owe you the 200, or I wrote 100, but she already writes a receipt and I received part when she did not receive it. That's the way he's getting out of that full obligation. Because when indeed he did not receive it, Tanai Batal, the stipulation is nullified, the obligation is there. That's called be'ilas. It's as if a man is with a woman without marriage. Halacha 9. Or the 3rd, if they stipulated that after they'll get married, if she'll predecease him, he won't inherit her. The man inheriting the wife is only rabbinic, and this is a financial. So why don't we say that they can make a stipulation? In this case, the Chachamim made their rule as strong as the Torah's rules. Because when it comes to inheritance by Torah, it's nullified, even though it's money. And that we'll learn later. It's very important. I cannot change the rules of inheritance. We will learn later that if a man writes a document, he writes that a moment prior to my death, I'm gifting my stuff to X, Y, or Z, it's valid. But you cannot change Yerusha. The Torah says how Yerusha works. And indeed, in Parshas Pinchas, the Torah uses the words concerning Yerusha, chukas mishpat. The word chuka means it's engraved, it's unchangeable. Now, this is only midrabanan, but the Chachamim made their Yerusha midrabanan like the Dinei Torah, which cannot be changed even by a Tanai, but when it comes to all the other responsibilities and privileges, all stipulations will be valid. For example, if a man prior to marriage tells her, listen, I'm marrying you on the condition that I don't owe you she'er, I don't have to give you mezainis, I don't have to give you ksus, or she says, I'm marrying you, I'll accept your ring on the condition that I own a lot of real estate, you have no rights to the rentals. The guy agreed, he agreed. Since it's a financial obligation, you can make a stipulation. And now we have to break down what's called mezainis. Exactly how much mezonot is a man obligated? Let's go.
The ones you're mentioning are all prenups, prenuptial agreements, pretty much.
Very good. Shkoya. So really, the whole ksuba is a prenup. The whole ksuba is clear rules, again, of 10 responsibilities a man has to his wife to be, 4 privileges that he has. All of that is somehow included in the ksuba, even though most of it is not even written in it. Now, how much mezainis does he have to give? People used to eat twice a day. Today they told us to eat 22 times a day. Then they would have 2 meals. and a meal consists of bread. How much bread? It's a city by city. How people eat in the city. What person? Not a person that's sick, that has no appetite. Not a gargara, not a person that doesn't stop eating. And what type of food with the bread? The type of food that people eat. If people have bread out of wheat. If people have bread out of barley. Oidas, rice, and millet. And furthermore, it's not just bread. He's chayiv to give parpedes. Parpedes is other foods that were eaten with the bread. Whatever people commonly ate, whether it's kitniyos, whether it's vegetables, also shemen lachila, he has to give her oil, oil for eating, oil for lighting fuel, pedas, fruits, desserts. He has to give her a little bit of wine if the minig, and that place is for women to drink wine. That's during the week. Now let's go on Shabbos. He has to set for her money for her to buy 3 meals for Shabbos that include meat or fish. Basar oy dagim. The minig today is to have both. And on top of that, part of Muzainis is giving her a stipend. How much? 1 ma'ah of kesef for her personal needs, like a pruta to wash herself, to go to the bathhouse, another couple of coins to go to the laundromat. Now this sounds like a very miserly amount of money. Yes, it is. Says the Rambam, if the guy is a nebacha ani, if you're an ani, so the Chachamim say you have to give this and you cannot get away with less. And if you don't have it, you have to divorce her and owe her the ksuba. You cannot be married and keep a woman bound to you when you're not giving her these basic necessities. But if the guy is wealthy, then everyone has to give to his wife mezainis according to his wealth. And the man is wealthy enough that he can afford to give her various meat meals per day. They obligate him to give this to her. And if he's very poor, he can't even afford the 2 meals of bread. So he doesn't get away by saying, I don't have. You don't have. Then the marriage I don't have is not going to work. Beis Din will force him to divorce her. Now hold on. If the guy is so poor, he won't have the ksuba. That's fine. I owe you the ksuba. Like this, at least she can marry another man. She's not going to starve to death. And when will he pay her the ksuba? Whenever he'll get the money. But if a man cannot fulfill these obligations, Beis Din will force a man to divorce his wife. Halacha 12. The man is going to give her all the money, but he has one stipulation, Kavan. I don't want to eat with you. Give you all the money you need. So then, I want you to eat there, and I'm going to eat over here. He has that right. As long as he eats with her every Friday night. It's amazing. So eating with her every Friday night is part of his obligation of giving her sustenance. That's not intimacy. That's part of marriage.
Just being a human.
Part of being marriage. Spending time with her. So you have to these people that constantly go on trips with the guys, which is something very, very unhealthy, in my humble opinion. It's good to have guy friends. You want to go out once a week to a fabrengen, to a shir, that's beautiful. Today, in the type of life that we live, how many times do you get to go away? A couple of times a year, go with your wife. But you have people that are ill, and that's what they do in their illness. They think they're doing a good thing, going with their guys. That's this mishugas. So, okay, what can you do? If that's the type of marriage you want to have, so knock yourself out.
I feel that way about the weddings where men and women are allowed to sit together, not dancing.
I know that, and that's. But here, there's a halachic reason why we can't do that.
Right, modesty.
It's a halachic reason why we can't do it. But you're right. It's a pity. In other words, that you're making my point. My point is that the opportunities for a couple to be together is really not that much. There's so many social engagements that because of the laws of modesty, we don't spend time together. So like at least eat with your wife. I don't want to eat with her. Once a week. And not less than that. Halacha Yud Gimel. What happens if a man gives all this money to his wife, but she didn't spend all of it? So the leftover money belongs to him. In other words, it's his money. He's chayiv to give her mezainis. If she didn't eat it, it goes back to him. Now, what happens if the husband is a kohen? It's easier for a kohen to give his wife truma because that he didn't even pay for. The disadvantage of truma is that you have to be careful not to make a tamei. So he doesn't get away by giving all of his obligation with Truma. On the other hand, we don't obligate him to give all chulin, which is disadvantageous to him, 50-50. Because but on the other hand, he's claiming, come on, guys, give me a break. I already have the truma. Let me fulfill my obligation with that which I have. Don't make my life even harder financially. So half and half. Part of that is chayiv to sustain his minor sons and daughters biblically until they're 6 years old. After they're 6, the chachamim obligates him to support them. And what's the difference between a biblical obligation and a rabbinic obligation? Prior to 6, we take the money away from him forcefully. After they're 6, if he doesn't want to give it, well, goy aden boy, we rebuke him, we embarrass him publicly, we appeal to him. You know, we do everything we could to force him to do it, but we can't actually take the money away. But im leiratza, then we make a public announcement and we say so-and-so is a achzer. He's cruel. He doesn't want to support his children. He's less than an impure bird, that at least birds, even tameyos, have rachmanas on their own. All that can be done, but the ein koif and oisel lozun achar sheish. That we don't force, meaning we don't actually take his money away and give it to his children. That's if this is a man that we don't know how much he's worth, and we don't know whether he's obligated to give tzedakah. We don't know that. But if he's a man of wealth, in other words, he's a person that's shaykh to give tzedakah, then we actually take his money away because of tzedakah. And we have these children be supported against the will of the father, from the father's estate until when they become adults. Here we go. Wow. A guy, we got to get running over here. A man goes on a trip and his wife comes to the basin and she says, I need mezoinas. He didn't leave money for me. So first of all, for the first 3 months after his going, the basin will not go into the estate because there's a chazakah that a man will not leave his house, a normal man, empty. So we presume he left for 3 months. After 3 months, Taka, Bezdin will stipulate that she is to get mezoinas. How do they do that? If he left estates, Bezdin will go in there, they will sell it for her mezoinas. Hold on. Didn't we learn that her income is in place of? Maybe we should deduct her income. We don't do that now. Now, when the husband comes and he says, "Oh, you stole my estate to give her X amount of money for her mezoinas, what about her income?" Let the husband deal with it when the husband comes. And Taka, if it will be discovered later that she had income, then he'll take it. What happens if she didn't go to Bezdin, but she herself sold his estate? Her sale is valid, and she doesn't even have to announce it, and no oath can be demanded of her. Until later, the husband comes and he makes a claim that I already left your money, then we'll have to deal with it. Then Megalgan on oath. Just like Bezdin will mamish go into the state and sell it for her, kach, they will go into a state and sell it for, if he left, sons and daughters that are under 6. But again, if they are 6 or older, since it's takachayev midrabanan but not midoraisa, ein zonan oisim in a chasav shalei b'fanav. If he's not here, we cannot go into a state, even if he is someone who's chayev to give tzedakah. So when we go against his will and take his property, that's only if he's present. Chemish in the state of someone became mentally not well, so then Bezdin goes into his property and they sell it and they support his wife and his minor children.
3 months is a 3 months is a very long time to wait. Who has food in their house for 3 months?
So we're presuming that people are half normal. No, people went on trips. A trip then was not, a trip today is a whole different ball game. You have communication. You can WhatsApp from the plane. When people went on a trip, they knew they're not coming back for a long time. And even if they thought it was a month trip, things went south quickly then. So a man would leave food. No one leaves their house without food. We're humans. We're not animals. Verstehst? Halacha Yudches. Yesh min hagoinim shohirim. She'ein pleiskim uzoynes l'isha sholach baylo shemeis baylo. She has to have a stark suba because maybe he divorced her. Some people say that. And if she doesn't say that she has the ksuba, which means maybe he divorced her, which is why she gave him the ksuba, ein la mezoynes, because she'em not ksuba baylo or memach ksuba solei. She'ein la mezoynes, kamoy she'izbar, as we're going to learn more details in chapter 17. The Yesh min shohirim. No, no, we don't have. So we presume that he was not moichel. We presume that she never got her ksuba, and she doesn't have to bring her ksuba. And the Rambam sides with the latter opinion. In the case where a husband is no longer here. Why? Because the chiyuv of mezainis is minat Torah. So she's considered already the muchzak. But if the husband dies, and Ritaka said that one of the privileges of the ksuba is, one of the responsibilities he asked her that she gets to live off his estate until when she gets remarried. Then she's taking money from the estate of the heirs. She has to bring the ksuba. And furthermore, it's not only because it's rabbinic, it's because she's eating off the estate of the heirs. What happens if the husband travels? She didn't go to Beis Din, she didn't sell anything, but she took a loan. So the din is when he comes back, the husband is chayv to pay back the loan. What happens if some guy became a hero? And many heroes are not heroes to their wives, they're heroes to other men's wives. All right? And they should go la'azazel, these men. So a guy gets up, I'm going to support her. Okay. He offered. When the husband comes, the husband should not pay him a penny. And that guy lost his money. The husband never asked him to support his wife. See,
ulterior motives.
Of course, ulterior motives. What do you think? No, but the point is that if she would borrow money, the husband has to pay back. But if a guy on his own is being the big hero, not a hero. He's a grubba young. Halacha 20. Habal she'amar le'ishtoi b'shasha halach tili maaseh yodayich b'mezenayich eila mezoynes she'ilu loy ratzas b'davar zev loysom chanata. She should have told him, like we learned before, I don't accept that. If she accepted that, then that's it. Then the husband is free. Halacha 21. The woman took the matter to court, and the court awarded her. And they, like we said, and the Beis Din went into the estate. He's not here, and they sold it, and they gave it to her, or she sold it. And then when the husband comes back, the husband says, "Woo! You sold my estate. I left her money for a year." So like this, she takes an oath. She has to take an oath, holding a holy article that he did not leave money. No, it's his claim is only enough to make her take an oath. Now, loy tava, if she did not take the matter to court, if she did not sell anything, she was a martyr. She decided to be, what was she, a martyr? Okay, I'll suffer. I'll wait until he comes. And I'm sorry. And she says, I borrowed money. See, that's another thing. She's taking a risk. If she borrowed money, here Kevan, and he claims I left you money, then he'll be believed. See, if a sale was done, the sale is done. If she did not sell anything, she simply borrowed, then Nishbash was Sesoshinia. He'll have to take an oath, and he won't have to pay back.
All right, the difference, what is the difference? I'm sorry. The other time she takes an oath, this time he takes an oath.
Yeah, because before they sold the estate.
Got it.
That's it. Here, it's when the husband comes, she already took it. It was already sold. Here, the husband's estate was not taken. She borrowed money. She'll have a debt. She won't pay back this debt. She doesn't have money to pay back the debt, but she'll owe the money. Halacha 22. If she sells movables, she sells and she says, I sold it for my mezainis. And he says, what are you talking about when he comes back? I left you money for mezainis. And she already sold it, Kevin. Since she already sold it, she swears, and that's it. And she doesn't have to pay him back. What happens? Okay, here, she's a martyr. She lived off nothing. And the guy comes back and she says, you should have left me $50 a week. You should have left me in LA $2,500 a week for food, right? You owe me back. If she didn't spend the money, if she became a martyr, then let her be a martyr. Yeah, you're not going to get the money. Halacha Chav Gimel. When a man takes a vow that his wife should not derive benefit from him, now a man is obligated for many things to his wife. So that vow has to be broken. So whether he stipulated until a certain time or whether he did not stipulate, the max that we allow him to live with this vow is 30 days. If those days finished, or if either the vow was only for 30 days, so it's over, or if he broke it, good. If it's for more than 30 days, Beis Din forces him to divorce her and give her the ksuba. Furthermore, what should she do during those 30 days? During those 30 days, she should work and she should eat off her own income. Then if someone of his friends now should give her the money that she still needs, it's his friend because this guy is going to be keeping the marriage together. And if more than 30 days pass, they force him to divorce her. If a man makes a vow saying that you, wife, cannot have any fruits. Again, he doesn't have that right, but we give 30 days. More than that, he's obligated to divorce her and give the ksuba. I feel even if he only made a vow for her not to be allowed to eat a certain bad food. I feel he did him in from a food that she never eats anyways. You cannot limit your wife with vows. So we tolerate it for 30 days. He was angry. After that, we force him to divorce her and give the ksuba. What happens if she makes a vow not to eat some type of fruit? Now, a husband has the right to break the vow, but he didn't break the vow. She made a vow to be a nazir, and he did not break it, which he could have. He was not made for it. If that's fine, let them stay that way. If at some point he says, I don't want to be living with a wife that's bound by vows, he has that right only to divorce her, but he has to give her the ksuba. Why does he have to give her the ksuba? Because he should have been made for it. So now you have the right to say, I don't want to be living with a wife that's making vows, that can't have this or can't have that. But since you could have annulled it and you didn't, you have to give her the ksuba.
That's like if your wife becomes a vegetarian.
Okay, very good.
Suddenly.
So she's not bound by a vow. Since she's not bound by a vow, it's not so bad. Now, today's final chapter, the 13th chapter of Hilchas Ishes, is going to continue to detail from the obligations a man has to his wife, from the biblical obligations, is to give her clothing. And as we'll see, clothing and housing come together. In Hasidus, it's called Makev HaKaroiv, Makev Harachik. They're both Makev. They're different than Mezoinas. The Rambam says She'edas Mezoinas is Pnimi, something that goes inner. Clothing is something that goes outside of her, and that includes also a home. As we'll see, details in this chapter has 20 halachas. Halacha Aleph says the Rambam, how much, what's the obligation to give? And I was speaking about a yearly obligation. The Golden Shal Chamishim Zuz Mishana Lashana Mimabe Oisana Yomim. During the times of Chazal, the Chazal says every year 50 zuz. Now, you have to understand that that coinage can change. So the Rambam says that those 50 zuz of the days of the Gemara, of the Mishnah and the Gemara, will be equivalent always to 6 1/4 dinarim of pure silver. Now, what happens? The way it would work then is he would buy her the new garments during the winter, because clothing with time they get worn out. During summer, anyways, you don't need to keep as warm as. So you can tolerate garments that are not as thick. You give it during the rain season. And now, veloy veshes below yoiseyan, and she wears it for a whole year. That means that during the summer, it's going to be worn out. Now, there's worn out that's wearable. Then you have shechakim. Shechakim is garments that are shmatas. The shmatas, which is the moisa, that the little bit that remains at the end, belong to her. He doesn't get it back. Moisar mezoinis, he gets back. Moisar ksusi doesn't. And actually, a woman, while she's in Nida, would wear those garments. Another thing, he has to give her chagor l'masnel, a belt for her loins. People used to wear jalabas, men and women. It's like a gown. But when you would go on a journey, when you would walk in the desert, you cannot walk with a free-flowing robe. So there would be belts that they would turn these robes more or less into a pants. That's called girdling your loins. Mamash, that's what they did. The kupach l'rosh, a cap for her head, and shoes once a Yom Tiv, new shoes every Yom Tiv. That this is the obligation that's only ba'oisen hayomim, only in the days of Chazal and in the land of Israel. Aval b'shar zamanim. Don't forget, if you're living in a place where the weather is much colder, this might not be enough. You have to understand. No, it varies from time and to place. It's not about the money. It's not about the money. There are certain places that the begadim are very expensive. There are certain places that the begadim are very inexpensive. It's not about how much money he's spending. He has to make sure that she has proper clothing, both for winter and for summer. The minimum of what women wear in that location. We're speaking about, again, a poor man, as we had on the previous chapter. If a man is wealthy, he's going to be chayv to give a lot more. But there is a certain minimum. Cannot go lower than the average of that place. Ksus doesn't only mean makav hakarif. Ksus doesn't only mean garments. It also means clay bayis and umadoir. This is very important. You understand? It means household goods and a dwelling place. Oh, it's a house and furniture. What's clay bayis? What do you mean by furniture? Well, mita mutzas, a bed and it's spread. Mapats is some sort of reed or mat. Chairs. So today, a bed and chairs. All of the garments, all of the kalim you need for eating, like a pot, a plate, a cup, a bottle, and the like. And a house. A house is at least to rent a house that is 4x4. Six. Don't try that today. Today, no one lives in a 6x6 house. No, it's a minimum housing. And it has to have a rochava chutzalot. It has to have a yard outside it, because when you have such a small house, you can't do your things in that house. It's good for sleeping. Lishtamish ba. And it's called the outhouse, a beis hakise, a latrine. You don't have to have private latrine. It can belong to many people, but there has to be a house with a yard that has access to a latrine. Part of garments is to give her ornaments. What's ornaments? Big day tzevoinim, colored garments. They used to have colored cloths that which she would use to cover her head and her forehead. Upuch and eye makeup. V'sadik is rouge. V'chayoytze for her not to be unattractive. Again, this is only the minimum. And you know what? If the guy has enough wealth that he's able to buy her clay meshi, silk garments, verikma, and embroidered clothing, and golden utensils, he's obligated to do so. Same thing when it comes to housing, according to his wealth. If he cannot even afford to give the minimum, like we had on the previous chapter, Beis Din forces him to divorce her. You have to give her the ksuba. The guy doesn't have money. He'll owe her. At least she'll be free to marry a man for her to have where to live. This does not go only to a wife, mamish, like the previous chapter, but also one's minor sons and daughters. Biblically, when they're under 6, he has to give them garments that's needed for them. He has to give them all the klitash mishumada lishkamboy. But here there's a big difference. When it comes to a wife, the wealthier the man, the more he's chayiv to give her. So if a man is wealthy, he has to buy her silk garments. When it comes to your children, there's a cap. There is a minimum. But if you're very wealthy, even for chinuch, don't buy them silk garments. No, it's spoil your wife, don't spoil your children. Halachically. He only has to give what they need. And zahaklal, kol mi sheyesh olav mezoinas, bein mechai bein achar moisoi. Means if the obligation is that after he dies, the recipient gets it from the estate, together with mezoinos comes the obligation to give ksus. Together with ksus comes the obligation to give clay bayis, household goods, and housing. Furthermore, any scenario where Beis Din has the right to go into one's estate against one's will and to sell it for mezoinos, they have the same right to go into his estate to sell it for the obligation of ksus and clay bayis umadoiroi. Halacha 7. Let's go back to mirroring what we learned in the end of the previous chapter. If a guy travels, as we learned, Beis Din will sell his estate, but you know what? They don't take any money for her ornaments. That not. Why? Because the guy's not here for her to wear these ornaments. That's what Beis Din says. But if a woman has a husband that becomes a shoita, most women claim that that's what happened to them. That the husband became, or he became deaf mute. Some men, they become deaf. They don't hear. But the husband is present. Then they even take money for her tachshit because the husband is there. Now, within a Balamishtoi, the Rambam is not going to repeat what happens if he traveled and she claims he didn't leave and he claims that he did leave. We learned that in the previous chapter. Whatever rules apply to Mazoinus apply over here. If he says nosati, he amres loy nosata din echad lakoil. Guys, go back to the Pedic Yud Beis, halacha chaf aleph, halacha chaf beis, as we just learned. We learned it because we're learning 3 chapters a day, so we just learned it. Halacha 8. Or if you're learning one Pedic, what you learned yesterday. A person makes a vow that what? He makes a vow that prevents her from wearing any type of ornament. So also, what did we have in the previous chapter? That by mezonos, for some types of foods, 30 days. Here we tolerate it for 1 year. If the vow is still there for more than 1 year, then we tell them either undo the vow or we force you, divorce her and give her the ksuba. That's if they're poor. If she's a wealthy woman, we only tolerate it for 30 days. Like mezonos. More than that, either yatinidra or yotivit ksuba. Halacha 9. If he made a vow, which does not prevent her from going to the bathhouse. So how much do we tolerate it for? So if you live in a city where people would go once a week, then we only tolerate it for the 1 week. If you live in a village, people would go once in 2 weeks, shtei Shabbosis. If he made a vow preventing you from wearing shoes, because in a city you can't go without shoes at all. A vow that's preventing her from borrowing or lending common household stuff, which is something commonly borrowed and loaned between neighbors, like a nafa kavara rechaim v'tanur, like a sifter, a sieve mill, and an oven. And he's saying, I'm making a. You cannot borrow, you cannot lend. Right away, Beis Din tells him either nullify the vow or give her a ksuba, because you're giving her a bad reputation. You're giving her a reputation of a woman that doesn't lend anything. And by the way, this goes also, if she makes a vow on herself that she's not going to or she made a vow that she's not going to weave begadim for her son, where it's common that women would be weaving the stuff for their son, it's going to give him a bad reputation because people are going to say he's a miser. So right away he can tell her, I don't want that. But in the case where she's the one that did, see, when he does the wrong, he has to give her the ksuba. If she's the one that's in the wrong, he gets to divorce her without giving her the ksuba. Because she's giving him a bad reputation amongst the neighbors that he's a kilai, that he's a miser, that he's a stingy guy. In places where women wouldn't only go out by covering their hair with the cap, which is what you have to do, but really that's enough. But if you live in a place, only women would wear a veil that Rambam is speaking about in the Muslims' conscience. It's called, I think, a hibab, shmibab. Then that's he's obligated to give her that. If that's the way women go, part of his obligation of ksus is to give
hijab.
Now we know. The minimum type of jibab. And if he's wealthy, then he has to give a fancier jibab. Why? Because a woman has to go out. She has to go to a house of mourning. She has to go to a festival. The man cannot say, "Don't leave the house." She has to be free to go to her parents' house to visit them. If there's someone mourning, if there's a simcha, to do chesed with her friends, to go visit her relatives, for them to come to her. A woman who's married is not in a jail for her not to be allowed to go and to come. However, the Rambam writes, it's not proper for a woman to constantly be going out. One time out, one time in the streets. Halacha 12. That's what he's saying. She cannot visit her parents. So if they live in the same city, we only tolerate that vow for 1 month. And the same concept. We wait for him. If it's beyond a month, we tell him, hello, you got to divorce her and give her the ksuba. If they live in another city, so she lechatchila would not go there once a month. She would only go there every yontif. So then we only tolerate it for 1 yontif. Mamtinon loy. Shnayim yoytzi v'yiten ksuba. Halacha 13. Hamad resishtoi. Shletelech lebeis ha'evel ulebeis ha'mishta. Right away we tell them, Yata nidra yoytzi v'yiten ksuba. Again, Shazed, such a vow will make her feel like she's in jail. Shazed kemisha asara bebeis hasoyer v'nol b'fanel. But if he claims, no, that specific place are filled with men that are prutzim, immodest men, whether it's in a house of mourning, whether it's in a house of a simcha, then we listen to him. Halacha yudalach. I don't want for your family's members to come to my house. He's not preventing her from going there. He doesn't like them, and goes two ways. That's every person has the right to say, I don't want someone to come into my house. We listen to him. Now, he cannot prevent her from going to them. She should go to them whenever she finds a need, when something happens. She can go there whenever. But they cannot enter only if, now there's exceptions. What happens if she's sick? What happens if she just gave birth? Then he has to have them as a guest. But generally, he's allowed to say so, because you don't force a man or a woman to have others against their will enter their own domain, and therefore it's two-way street. What's it called? If it's good for the goose, it's good for the what's the expression? Gander. I don't want for your mother to come into my house. I don't want for your sister to come into my house. I'm not living in the same chutzner because they oppress me. They make me feel uncomfortable. We listen to her. So sometimes for derech outside, not in your own house. Halacha 15. A man says, I will not dwell in this home because people here are bad people. People here are immodest, or they're goyim here. I'm afraid of them. They listen to him, even though we don't know for them to be immodest. Go away from a bad neighbor. And even if she owns a house, so he marries her, and he tells her, now that we're married, I don't want to live in your house. Not because of the neighbors. We listen to him. And we move to live amongst kosher people. And same thing for her. The Cheni Shamra came. In other words, he owns an apartment. She says, hubby, I don't want to live in this house. You know why? Because I'm not comfortable with the neighbors. And the guy says, no, I trust you. I don't care that the neighbors are immodest people and they're constantly, they're flirting with you. No, we listen to her because she says, I don't want to get a bad name. I don't want to live in such a setting. Halacha 16. And now the final topic of this chapter will be moving from country to country. What happens if one of the couple wants to live here and one wants to live there? What happens? So here are the rules. First of all, Kol HaYishuv, the settled world, is divided into different lands. We recognize borders. There are different countries. There's the land of Canaan, there's the land of Mitzrayim, there's the land of Yemen, there's the land of Ethiopia, there's the land of Babel, there's North America, there's Canada, there's Mexico, and every eretz means what we call a country, is divided into medinois. Medinois means cities, and divided into suburbs or into villages. Other Yisrael, the land of Israel, concerning marriage, as we'll see in a moment, is divided into three countries. By the way, it's not only concerning marriage, we have it also by the laws of Shemitah, right? That you can only eat that produce when it's still available out there for the chayas. Out there means every Medina is judged separately. Yehuda, Ever HaYarden, V'Agolan. Now the Rambam will explain, what does that mean? Like why for marriage are we saying, the question will be, if I live in Yehuda and my wife lives in Ever HaYarden, or if I want to move to another country, as we'll see in a moment. Halacha Yudzai. If a man, Shehoya me'eretz min ha'arotzis, a man comes from one country, and he married a woman that comes from another country, and there's a machlokes given, where will they settle? So the rule is that she, in marriage, part of marriage is her understanding that she's going to live where he lives. We're not speaking about him during the marriage changing. We're speaking about, they never spoke about it. He comes from one land, she comes from another land. So the rule is, Is a woman obligated? No, a woman can say, I'm not moving there. Fine. So then he'll divorce her, but he won't have to give her the ksuba. That's the point. Because almanas kein saw. That's a understanding of marriage, even though they never spoke about it. Avo, however, that's because Kevan, from the beginning, they never spoke about it. He says, I want to settle in my land. What happens if you marry a woman and you and she are from the same country? And now he wants to move to another country. She can say no. Israel is the exception. She can say no. That's why we said that Israel is divided into 3 countries. That means that if they're both living in Yehuda, he cannot force her to move to Galil or to Evar HaYarden. You cannot force a person to live the country. If the husband prior to marriage comes from one country, she prior to marriage comes from another country, marriage means, unless they spoke out otherwise, that she's going to move to his country. But if you are both from the same country, you can't force someone to leave the country. But in a country itself, you could force someone to go from city to city or from village to village in the same land, but not so simple. There are exceptions to that. But when you're moving around, you cannot move from a city to a village. You cannot force to move from a village to a city, because there are certain things that living in a bigger city is advantageous. There are other things that living in a village is advantageous. And therefore, the party that doesn't want to move has the right claim. I don't want to move there. Halacha 80. But you could compel to move from city to city or from village to village. Here also, it's not so simple. You cannot compel someone to go from a pleasant surrounding to a non-pleasant surrounding. Now, by the way, here also, everything has an advantage. You can argue why, if we're living in an ugly place, in a non-pleasant place, and I want to upgrade, why can't I force it? Because a woman says that when I'm living over here, I'm comfortable going out without needing to get dressed up, without needing to put on makeup. If we're moving to that neighborhood, everyone dresses up. I don't want to have to live with that pressure. If you're going to a pleasant surrounding, she's going to have to spend more time on me. And she says, I don't want to do that. I'm not used to that. For her not to become, she cannot be in a place where without extra effort, she's going to appear inferior or appear unattractive. That's why you can't change the type of neighborhoods. You can never move, even Medina, even Mekfar Lekfar. You cannot go from a place where the majority are Yidden to a place where the majority are Goyim. But on the other hand, if a man wants to move from a place where Rubai Goyim, Lamakam, Shurubai Yisrael, that is something that can be forced. If we're speaking about any place out of Israel to another place out of Israel, or like we mentioned, there are 3 Medinas in Eretz Yisrael. But if the move is from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, always koyfen la'alos. One forces the other. Even from a nice, pleasant surrounding to a place where it's not a pleasant surrounding. Even from a place where the majority are Yidden to a place the majority are Goyim. You force that aliyah. And on the other hand, you can never force someone moving from Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. Even if you're moving from a place which is called a Novera, a place that's unpleasant. That is Rubai Goyim. You're moving to a place in Chutz La'aretz that's beautiful and filled with Yidden. That's downgrading. And the final halacha chav, Omar ho'ish la'alis l'Eretz Yisrael. A man tells his wife, okay, I want to move to Israel, and she doesn't want. Then, halachically, he can divorce her without giving the ksuba. And by the way, it's a two-way street. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If she says, I want to move to the Holy Land, and he doesn't want, she forces him to give her a get, and he gets the ksuba. She gets the ksuba because he has to listen to her. Huadin, same thing is from any place in the Holy Land to Yerushalayim. You can always force that aliyah. Shahakoil mailam l'Eretz Yisrael. Ve'ein hakoil mitziyam misham. V'hakol mailam l'Yerushalayim. Ve'ein hakoil mitziyam misham. Givaldik.
Must have been tough for him to write this, living in Egypt.